So it's not impossible, but my own guess is if it takes place, it would be only as part of a broader action against Iran. I mean, the only real concern of Israel and the U.S. about Hezbollah, which has been pretty quiet, in fact, from the Israeli withdrawal in 2000 until 2006, there wasn't a single rocket firing attributed to Hezbollah up till July 2006. What they're concerned about is it is a deterrent to U.S. attack on Iran. So if the U.S. decides to attack Iran, or Israel decides to attack Iran, Hezbollah rockets, which may be more advanced now, are a deterrent. They can rain on Israel. That's a deterrent, and they want to eliminate it. So my guess is if there's an attack, that's what it'll be. Incidentally, the same is true of this whole discussion of missile defense in Eastern Europe, which is causing serious rifts with the Russians. I mean, for the Russians, it's a serious problem because these systems, if they ever work, are a threat to the Russian deterrent. And in fact, they're placed in a position which makes them a threat to the Russian deterrent. You can read that. U.S. strategic analysts explain it. But the official pretext is their defense of Europe. They're defending Europe against an Iranian attack. I mean, that's at a level of Ronald Reagan putting on his cowboy boots and quaking in terror because the Nicaraguan army was 2 days from Harlingen, Texas. You remember that incident. People didn't laugh because we're disciplined around here. But Europe is about as likely to be hit by an Iranian missile as it is by an asteroid. So if Europe's interested in defense, it might be putting up an asteroid defense system. Unless the Iranians are dedicated to being vaporized in 1 second, they would never send off a missile with a nuclear weapon, even if they had one, because of the obvious reaction. So what the missile defense system is for, the only function it can serve, apart from being a threat to the Russian deterrent, hence a U.S. first strike weapon, is as a threat to Iran. It's telling Iran, no matter, even if you get missiles and nuclear weapons, you're not going to be able to use them. We can hit you first and you can't react. Missile defense altogether is a first strike weapon. It's pretty well understood on all sides. It's saying we can deter a retaliatory strike, so we can strike you first with impunity. And that's the way it's understood on all sides. And I think Hezbollah is regarded pretty much the same way. Lebanon is in terrible shape now. I mean, it's a real pity because it's a wonderful country. It has every reason to live in peace, but it's being torn apart to a large extent by outside pressures.
A question for Professor Chomsky. How, if at all, you think your views on Israel and the Middle East have been affected by your growing up as a Jew in a Jewish family?
Yeah, well, I grew up in an intensely Jewish environment, in fact, Jewish ghetto pretty much, and was a Zionist youth leader and so on. And it may surprise you, but my views as a Zionist youth leader in the 1940s are about the same as what they are now. I was part of what was the Zionist movement that was opposed to a Jewish state. And that was a substantial part of the Zionist movement in those days. There wasn't an official commitment to the Jewish state until 1942. It was maybe in people's minds, but it's not official in the United States, incidentally. And it remained a substantial part of what was called the Zionist movement in Palestine, too, that was against the Jewish state for the kinds of reasons I mentioned, and in favor of Arab-Jewish cooperation. They were socialists, so Arab-Jewish working-class cooperation. That was the part of the Zionist movement I was connected with, and circumstances change, so the tactics you think of change. But and I wrote about it. From 1967 to 1975, there was a real chance, in my view, to institute what's now called a one-state solution. Israel could have moved to create a federal arrangement inside Cisjordan, Jordan to the sea, which they controlled, with a Palestinian and a primarily Palestinian, primarily Jewish entity, could be federated, could lead to further integration as circumstances allow, and that would end up with some kind of democratic state. that option, if you're interested, I wrote about it at the time. There's a book, a lot of articles, and it was just total anathema on every side. Everybody hated it. By 1975 it was over. By the time the Palestinians had committed themselves to an independent state, and the world had accepted what has become the total international consensus on a two-state settlement, this proposal was gone. An interesting question you might ask is why it's popular now when it's completely unfeasible, whereas it was anathema when it was feasible. So why is it that the New York Times and the New York Review of Books and so on publish articles on it now when they would have been willing to slaughter you when you suggested it when it was feasible? I think you can make up an answer to that, which is not too pleasant, but I'll leave it to you. But yeah, it certainly influenced. It's one of the main reasons I'm interested in this. One of the main reasons why I studied Arabic for years in college. Yeah, this was major interest.
Roger Leisner, Radio Free Maine. In 1994, I taped you and Israel Shahak, a noted Israeli dissident, speaking on religious fundamentalism in Israeli domestic and foreign policies. So 14 years later, has religious fundamentalism disappeared from Israel? Is it getting stronger? What's the status?
Well, minor correction. That was Israel Shahak giving a talk, and I introduced him. Okay. Yeah, old friend. But and if you remember, the meeting was practically broken up. But, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's stronger now, much stronger. Everyone agrees on that. In fact, if you look at who the settlers are, the illegal settlers in the occupied territories, the ultra-religious ones they're way out of proportion to their numbers in the population. And for them, it's fine. If you live in the West Bank, it's like now when I go home, I'm going to a Boston suburb, okay? Nice Boston suburb out in the west, Lexington. Yeah, that's what the West Bank is. It's the nice, pleasant suburbs for Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. Also happens to be sitting on the major water supplies and breaks up the Palestinian territories and so on. But and you can live there subsidized. I didn't get subsidized to move to Lexington, but if you move to the settlements in the occupied territories, the illegal settlements, you get subsidized. So you get a nice house, a superhighway taking you right to the Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. You don't have to worry about Arabs because they can't be seen. They're off somewhere else. And you get paid for it. So sure, people move. And the religious settlers way out of proportion to their numbers. And there is an increasing growth of fundamentalism, not just there, but all over the world. I mean, Christian evangelicals have the kind of political clout now that they didn't have 30 or 40 years ago in the United States. Nothing like it. I mean, the numbers were about the same, but they weren't organized as a political force then. And in Israel-Palestine, on all sides, and in fact throughout the region, Islamic fundamentalism and Jewish fundamentalism are increasing. Part of the reason is understood. That's a great part of it. As far as Islamic fundamentalism is concerned, remember that's what the U.S. has been supporting all along. The most extreme Islamic fundamentalist tyranny in the world is Saudi Arabia. By comparison, Iran looks like a secular heaven, and that's the leading U.S. ally, and it's been the same elsewhere, and for good reason. The main enemy has been secular nationalism. That's dangerous. Secular nationalism can lead people to seek alternative paths of development, independence, and so on. So the U.S. has been supporting extreme fundamentalism. And in fact, as secular nationalism has been destroyed, as it has to a large extent in Lebanon too, both internally because of its internal, a lot of internal problems, but also externally by force, something replaces it. And what replaces it is quite often religious fundamentalism. I suspect that's partially true in the United States too. When you have a country where 80% of the population thinks the government is run by the few big interests looking out for themselves, not the people, and I can't do anything about it, people aren't just going to give up. They're going to turn somewhere else. And one of the places you can turn is to megachurches. These are phenomena that you see all over the world. one of the effects of the U.S.-run terror wars and murderous national security states in Latin America has been a rise in Protestant fundamentalism. Actually, it's complex, because in the 1980s, the U.S. was at war with the Catholic Church. But that's because the Catholic Church in Latin America committed a grave sin. They went back to the Gospels and took them seriously. They were a radical pacifist message, which you're not supposed to pay attention to. And they were organizing peasants to read the Gospels and think of what they mean and so on. So they had to be wiped out. And there was a two-pronged effort. The U.S. ran the violent side, the Vatican defrocked them and so on. And it did pretty much undermine them. And one of the consequences is a considerable rise in Protestant extreme fundamentalism. I mean, people don't give up when you destroy their hopes. They turn to something else. Harm Hezbollah, that probably helped them.